So thanks Chidambra for joining us again, and it's nice to see a bigger crowd this time. So rather than last time when we had lesser number of people. Okay, so have we are in the fifth class now this time. So I guess some of you might have missed a few classes, and I'm just going to assume that you have at least followed till the third one, right? Because I won't be able to go back to the third. So I will try to do a little revision on the fourth one. So in case you have missed something, you can always watch the YouTube videos offline. And so what we will do today is okay. I will go to the fourth one again. I will do a revision on that. But the fifth in this class we are planning to cover the concepts called revision. I mean recursion, right? So recursion is not a very oft used, uh, technique. I mean, at least in the testing area, it is not much used. But I just have to introduce the recursion as well because for a sake of completeness, I have to do that. Then, along with the recursion, I'm planning uh, to also cover, I think something related. Okay, I'll talk about that. So probably those two topics will take around half an hour to 45 minutes, and then I will go to the file input and output. So which is a very critical area. So that will help you actually do a lot of stuff. So that plus the string manipulation. So the file input output doesn't go by itself. If you have to actually do something really valid using, I mean, really useful with this file input output, you also have to know how to manipulate the strings, right? So when you read something from a file, how do you actually read through that a particular part of the string? I mean, so use of regular expressions, right? So all those things we will cover in about an hour or so, and we will also spend some time on the API testing. So we will start on the API testing this week. Probably will continue in the next week as well, right? Because originally I had thought about doing that only in the sixth class, but we will start the API testing this time. So those are the things. So I'm hoping that by about 2.5 hours to 3 hours we should be done for this class. And the other thing is we also passed out the assignments to all of you, right? So when I say assignments, it's mainly for the purpose of certification. So certifying people is something which is really hard, right? It doesn't work in a black and white mode, right? So we cannot just see that you have come in and we cannot just certify you. I mean, it's not just doesn't go by just attendance alone. So what we thought better to do was give a certain set of questions, problems. So a limited number, not a very huge number, and those problems. Are you able to hear? Is there? Okay. So the problems as such is not large number, but um, just to make it useful for the purpose of survey, just to because I have to understand how much of Python you have understood, and how much of that will you be able to use it yourself, right? For that purpose, we have tried to make the programs as an interactive programs as much as interactive as possible, right? So okay. Um, so I have given, I think three of them are game problems. You have to create some games. So many of them are like the computer actually plays with a user. I think we have seen the last time, I think during the last class or before that, we have seen a secret number game, right? But that was using a binary search. That was a different one, but this time the assignments that I have passed on during 2 days back, the purpose of certification, that one was a different secret number. So don't confuse between these two. Okay, so this is a little more involved problem, and I don't know if I have the copy of that. I may not have in this computer, maybe. So since it's there with all of you, have received that, right? The copy of that problems, right? If you haven't, you get it from your colleague. Okay. Um, so three of them are game problems. The the good thing about game problems, while it is attractive actually to create a game problem and you can use that to play and you can show them to someone, and but it's also that you the games has to be interactive, right? So which doesn't come easily. I mean, if you have to create a program which is really interactive, then it needs a lot of design work. You have to design your solution well. So it needs a lot of thinking behind it. So, so what I intend to convey through that, through the exercises, is that the session that we are handling, the Python sessions, is not just for learning programming. It's also for solving a real problem. Okay, and also learning how to think algorithmically, also to think how to design, how to understand how to design your solutions. So all these go hand in hand. So it's not just programming alone. So that's the reason the exercises are maybe a little hard if you look at it. Okay, especially the last but one, the I think if I remember right, it is the mastermind game. So how many of you know mastermind game? How many of you have played it? Okay, so if you haven't played the mastermind, I have given the references for each of the games that I'm talking about there. There is a link for the mastermind game also. It's a little hard to create. Let me admit, it's a little hard. Okay, so that is the reason why. And the last one obviously is the project Euler, which we talked last time in the last class. So I think that is a little more down to earth problems, but it's still not easy. Okay, the first few problems you will find it easy, but I'm asking you to do the 10 problems. Okay, so as you go further down, the problems will get a little more tougher. Okay, so that is the reason I'm giving 1 month for you to finish that, right? So yeah. So it is. So it yeah. So you are not limited to your class. What you gathered from the class only. You can use the knowledge that you attain from reading books or going to YouTube videos and seeing, or maybe some other certification programs. You can use all that. You have the entire Google with you, right? So it's in fact that is the secret behind. If you ask me, that is the secret behind being a good programmer, right? Being able to do a good amount of research yourself. It's not just about what you acquire from a book or from a video. Not just that alone, right? It won't work. It's not just like your school exam where you just look at the textbook and attend the classes and look at what the teacher puts and writes down in the board and you take down, right? It's not just that. You do your research on yourself. So so any questions on that one we can take up during either as an offline discussion, right? I know that there are a few of you have asked questions how to do that. So one important thing, yeah, I think in the vlog discussions I have brought it up. A few of you have asked, do I have to create that UI? How do I create that UI? So the expectation is not to spend time on the UI at all. Don't create a UI program. Okay, so just spend time on the creating that algorithm and creating it as a command line tool, and all the inputs you can take it using the raw inputs. Okay, no need to tie it up with a UI or anything, right? So no graphics at all. There is no graphics involved in this. Okay, so with that said, so the last class, what did we cover last class? I think we talked about functions, right? um, have anybody of so those who were not here the last time, I mean attending here, have you seen it online? Okay. um, so how do you define a class, sorry, how do you define a function um, using the def keyword? And if you have used any language, you will have an understanding of how function works in any other. It's very similar to how it works in Java, let's say. So you have a function name which has a convention. So it cannot start with a number. It has to have alphabets, and you cannot use special case characters. So there are some certain conventions, and there are certain rules, not just conventions. There are some rules to naming your function. Then the function can have one or more parameters in it. or arguments, so-called arguments. And did we talk about uh, optional arguments last time? Optional arguments for functions. Okay, so I think we can look at it this time. I will just show you what optional arguments mean. So what it means is essentially the if you create a function, I'm going to my Python shell. So if I okay, sorry, what just happened? What's wrong in this? It's all typing control characters. Okay, now it's okay. Okay, so how do you define a function using a def keyword, right? So let's define a function called a, right? So the if you haven't attended the last class or if you haven't seen the, just watch it carefully. So the way you define functions is you have to apart from all those what you see in the first line, the entire body of the function has to be inside the function. So basically it has to be indented inside. So you are starting a block, which means you have to put a colon at the end of it, and you have to. So let's say we are just printing hello. Okay, this is a function definition, which doesn't take any parameter, but once you call the function, it will just print the hello. Right now, how do you call the function now? You use a with two brackets. So even if there is no parameters, you have to use the brackets compulsorily. So it just prints the hello. Now, how do you use? Let's say we want to pass a name to this function as a parameter. Okay, so the idea is that instead of just saying hello to that guy, I mean hello, I will say hello to the person's name that is passed. So we have seen this last time. So we will basically concatenate this like this, right? So we can either print it here or we can. Okay, I will first print it within the function. So what you will do is something like this. So we will call it by passing a string to that, right? So not surprising. Now we have the option. So normally, typically in a function, you will not be printing. You will so any input output will not happen inside a function. So a function is meant to be a generic code. It is meant to be primarily the reason for a function is the reuse, right? For that reason, there is no input and output there. So all the input and output happens in your main program, right? So let me rewrite this. So what I will do is in my, I will redefine this function. And instead of printing it here, I will just say return. Okay. So here there is one more, since I want to actually merge it up with another feature that again we discussed it last time. I will use what is called as a placeholder. So if you haven't seen the placeholder, so the way it works, is it's if you have used C language probably, if you have read about C language, or I think, do you use this in Java and the placeholders concept? No? Okay. In C language, there is a printf command. I mean, printf command function, right? So the printf normally it accepts different placeholders like %f, %s, %d. The same thing is available here. What the concept of placeholder is, whatever you pass here, right? In this percent in the bracket here, this will substitute for this. So in the same order. So if you have, let's say, two parameters that you want to print, both will be mentioned. So I will show one more example, but for this example, there is only one parameter. So the name is going to substitute for that %s. So instead of printing, I returned it, and instead of just concatenating it, I just used a placeholder. Now, how do I call it? I can call it like a of, okay, I will use a single string. But when I call this, actually, if you, yeah, I'm able to get that output hello Anand because it's a shell. If I actually use this in a program, you won't be seeing that hello Anand printed because I'm not asking you to print yet. So ideally, when I call this function, I should call it like print a Anand. So what happens here is a Anand get called, and that function returns a string. Now the return string I'm printing in my main program. That's the way it works. Okay, that so any questions so far? This is only for the benefit of those who have not come last time. Okay. Yeah. So let's say we want to have a function which prints. It's a very silly example. So let's say I will tell the program that this is my name and this is my age. Let's say. So the program is essentially to print that hello Anand, you are this many years old, right? Whatever. So there are two parameters there. So one is a string and one is a number, an integer, fundamentally, right? Now the way I will handle this is I will say return you hello. No, I will say %s for this guy, right? And put a full stop. I will just exactly create that string just like how it needs to be printed. Okay, so I will say you are percent %d. %d stands for the placeholder for integer. %d years old, right? Now I will give the actual variables here. This is how I pass the actual variables. So what happens is this name substitutes for this one and age substitutes for this one. Okay, so let's see. Now you would have noted that I I don't have to convert the age to a string anymore. Since I used %d, the Python is intelligent to know that you are trying to convert that into a string. I don't have to do anything. That is one advantage. And the second advantage is obviously your string looks very simple. You don't have to have pluses in between, which makes it very lengthy, very unreadable, right? Um, so how do I call this? I will say print. I'll say, okay, sorry, right? I'll just say print a of the name and the age. So, okay, now I was talking about the concept of optional arguments. So what if every call doesn't need to necessarily have, let's say, the age? I'm just giving an example. There could be realistic examples. We will see that in later course. So let's say if you don't want to call the function, uh, you just want to pass the name. You don't want to pass the age, right? If you don't pass the age, take a default value for the age. That is called optional arguments. The optional arguments can occur anywhere in the list of parameters. So this is how it works. So when I create this function, I will pass my default arguments, default values for certain arguments like this. Okay, are you able to see this? I'll pass the default values for my arguments. So for example, in this case, I said, if I don't call the function with an age value, take 10 as a default. Okay. No problem. Okay. Um, correct. So did you understand this? Okay. Now the rest of the thing is the same. So this is my function body. Now I can call the function like what I did before, like this, right? So if I call it with 20, it will say 20 years old. Now if I don't call with a number, it will still give 10 years old. That's called an optional argument. It will use my default. Are you getting what I'm saying? If you didn't understand, please tell me. Did you get it? No? Yes? the default value, because I have already defined it in my function definition. In my function definition, I have mentioned that the age parameter should have a default value of 10. Yes, no? Understood, right? Okay, correct? Okay. So that is an optional part of it. Now, this optional arguments can be more than one also. For example, I can define this optional argument here also. So if I call it like this, so I can now call it like this without any arguments, because there is a default for both parameters. Okay, I'm hearing myself back from somewhere, so just give me a minute. Yeah, yeah. Overloading. The so the question was, can we overload methods? Overloading methods comes when the class definition comes. We haven't still discussed classes. Okay, so I think we should probably keep it for a later time. Let's not bring the classes now. It can be a little confusing, at least for the majority of the class. Okay, so far, okay, right? I have to see heads nodded, right? Otherwise, I'll think that you didn't understand. Okay, so I'm going to assume that all of you are okay with this. So what else did we talk about last time? Um, I think we tried several examples of functions last time. What else did we cover? Apart from function, was there any other concepts that we covered last time? I don't have the syllabus at this time with me. It's there in my other computer. So for those of you who have attended, you can tell me if there is something conceptually that you have covered but you haven't understood, you don't remember. Nothing, right? Okay. So Chidambara, is there something in functions specifically you want to talk about? Anything else in functions? No, right? Okay, I think we also talked, yeah, we talked about how to create nested functions. Yeah, how can I forget that? That's something important we covered. So that is the beginning of defining what is called as decorators. We also talked about it for a brief time, but we didn't talk specifically about decorators. But the concept of nested functions is very important. So you can create a function within another function, right? So for instance, if I create a function called def of a, now what I'm doing here is I'm defining another function called b within that. What is the purpose of this? Let's see. So let's say this one is going to return. Okay, since I'm in the shell, it's going to be really hard to go back. Okay. Now this function just returns hello. Okay. Now I return the function called b. You have to follow very carefully. So okay, let me do one thing. I will open my IDE because it's very difficult to see indentation here. So let me see if I can. Okay. So I define a function called a. Okay. Now in this, I define a function called b. Okay. So in which I said there is only one statement which says return, let's say a string called hello. And now come back to the definition of A, where I say return B. Can you can you see what I'm trying to do? I'm basically trying to return a function that I have defined inside another function. Okay, so that is a good thing about Python. So we talked about Python being in Python functions being considered first class citizens. Just like variables, you can pass functions around. You can think of it like a function pointer, if you will. In other languages, you have the concept of pointers, right? I mean, you don't have it in Java, but you have in languages like C and C++. You had concept of pointers, so you can return the entire function from another function. Now, how is this useful? Okay, in this is a silly case actually, but let me just show you how it is useful in this particular case. So if I call this function, okay, now if I print a, okay, okay, let me try running this. Okay, can you tell me what you expect if when I print a? No, what is returned from the function a? It is returning the function called b. So when I say print a, what is it? What will it print? It will print the address of b. So there is a string representation for the function. Okay, so now, okay, let's just try to execute this. Okay, for some reason I'm not able to execute. Okay, I will execute it from here, from the command line. Oh, I didn't save this. That's why. Okay. Yeah, so it returns the function uh, memory address, right? It gives the function. Now, what will you do if you want to print hello? What do you think I should do? Hmm? Where should I call the b function? Okay, so what should I change? Just dictate me what should I do? I will just write it as it is. Where, in which line? This line, this line, where? Print this line. So what should I do? B off. Okay, I should call it B off. Like this. A off. Seems tricky, right? So this is actually one of the important aspects about Python. Okay, so it can seem very confusing in the beginning. I mean, even for sometimes I also get confused. Let me be honest. I also get confused. But if you can keep your brain straight, right, then Python can really work wonders. What should I do in this case? Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. So I think you can write this program. Return B braces like this, like this. Hmm. Okay, okay, okay. So we have one answer. Okay, I will wait for the other answers, or rather, they will try, or you can also try it in your system. Just try it and let me know what will work. There are at least two different ways you can use this. You mean without this? Yeah, this is what we wrote before. But what your name is Bharat. What Bharat suggested was we should have a bracket, which means we are basically return a call to the function. We are not just returning a function, we are calling that function and returning that value. No, first of all, just check if this works. This is working, right? No, this is not, this won't work. I mean, when you actually, uh, this won't work. It cannot be B. This has to be A, right? Yeah, it's the same code. So initially I had given this code without this brackets. So without this brackets, if you call it, it will just print the function address. Correct? This is working for everyone. I think Krishna, you are trying, right? Okay, yeah. Um, I think I'm seeing some of you don't have laptops. I think at least from the next you have. Okay. Make sure you are practicing, because the reason I'm insisting that you should have a laptop is if you don't practice Python, then it is, you can just forget it. Not just Python. It is true for any programming environment. It might seem very simple when somebody does it. When you watch somebody do it, oh yeah, it looks so simple. It returns the functions. It's the return, yeah, the function pointer. So it's basically the function itself is being returned as a variable. That is why you are getting the function B. It is not a call yet to the function. So what you are seeing, the number 0x035, that's a memory address, obviously, right? Okay, we haven't still entered this class, but means the portion for this class we haven't still done, so we don't have too much time here. So a dot a dot. No. Dot is not something that we can use yet. Dot is actually usable only if you have a class. If A is an object of some class, then you can say A dot this. But it's not an object of anything. It's just a function. A is a function. It won't work. Yeah. So the solution Bharat suggested was we can call it like this. Right? This works, right? Okay. Now, is there any other way that you can think of? So obviously, when I call A here, if let's say I don't have this, okay. Now, if I call A, it is going to return the function here. Now, at this point, can I call the function? Can I call like this? Right? It might seem very cryptic. Nobody will be able to understand why. How come you have two brackets in a sequence? Doesn't make any sense. It's actually just for an academic interest I'm just sharing, but you may not see such constructs very frequently. But it can be used in this way as well. Python is so flexible, you can use in whichever way. It's just like math, right? However you do the operations, you will get the same result. So you can use this as well. Is it working? If you do this, okay. So this is the yeah. I think last time we also talked about, okay, how much is the time? Okay. Okay. We talked about decorators. So I said this is the basis of decorators. So why is decorators used? We said it can be used if you want to modify a function, right? let's say you have a function like called, uh, let's say a itself. Okay, I will delete this entire thing. Let's say we have defined a function called a. Let's say with an argument. Okay, this returns the name. Now, when you call this function with a print, obviously what we expect is, okay, I have to run it every time because I cannot just make a assumption that it works. Yeah, so it returns Anand. Now, let's say rather than just printing the name, every time I call the function, I want to do something more with that function. So I just don't want to print only the name. I want to print, let's say, um, I mean, right now with this example, I can't give something, but every function call to a, I want to print um, the length of the string, length of the string name. Okay, the first obvious way that you can think of is instead of I can modify the function body itself. Why don't I modify the function body, right? But plenty of times what happens is these functions. Right now, this function is something I have written, but you might be using a function from a third-party module in which you cannot really modify it. Unfortunately, every Python code is actually open source, so you can actually take the code and modify it. But still, if you have to do that for, let's say, three such modules, then you will lose your patience. First of all, you have to read and understand what the code is, right? So you won't be able to do that. So let so my the reason why decorators are useful is without modifying your function code, I can do something more in addition to what the function does. Okay, so what we can do here is we can define another function called b, okay, which takes a function called f. I've defined a function. Okay, just follow me with this because it's a difficult concept to catch. I agree. Um, so we have defined another function called b, which accepts some argument. At this time, let's say it's just an argument. Okay, we don't have to define a type at this time. Now I will within this I will define what is called a wrapper. Okay, in this wrapper, I will basically say print len of. Okay, now for actually doing this name, it takes a little more, but so for the time being, I'm not using a length. I'm just printing inside the function. I'm just doing something additional. In addition to just printing the name, I'm just doing something additional. And now I will make a call to the function. If you see this f, you will recognize that this is the same as what I passed here. Okay. Now I will print outside the function and come outside and return wrapper. Now, if you actually observe this, the wrapper that I am returning from the b function is a modified version of your original a function. Just take some time and understand. Just look at it and see if you can. This is the same example as similar example as what we saw before. So here, inside this function called b, okay, I have defined another function called wrapper. Okay, and in this wrapper function, in addition to making a call to the original function f, so here, yeah, I will make a call to this. So I will call it like this. I will call it like print b of a. Now, what I'm doing here is in addition to uh, the in addition to just executing the function called a, which is passed here as f. In addition to just this is the function call. In addition to this, I'm also printing two strings inside the function and outside the function. So effectively, my function A is actually changed to do something more. Okay, if you don't understand, don't worry, because we won't have too much time at this time to explain, get into the details. We'll probably come back in another class. Okay, so at this time, it's time to get into the next. Let's because we are already at 11 o'clock, so we have to get into the next. I will keep this saved, so we'll come back to this example later on. Okay, so map and lambda. Okay, lambda. Okay, I will just stop at saying that um, the lambdas is a concept. You might have heard of lambdas in especially in functional programming context. Have you heard of functional programming anytime? Just heard of it. Okay, so functional programming is uh, is said to be the next paradigm shift in the programming. So it is just like when the object-oriented programming came in, when there was structured programming, right? So similar to that, there is a concept called functional programming. Let's not talk about, that's not the intent. We will not talk about functional programming. But one of the concepts in functional programming is what is called lambda. Okay, there was a support for lambda functions in Python a long way. So the effectively it's this. Now every function you define that we have seen until now will have a function name. You will have a definition of a function. So which can consist of one or more lines, can take one or more parameters. It can take more than one lines. It will return. Now lambdas are essentially functions that you create dynamically on the fly. Okay, without telling an example, I cannot really show that. That's why I'm not doing that. Since we are just starting to, we are all trying to grapple the basic concepts of Python, right? So I don't think we should get in there. But lambdas is one of the. Just understand that there is something called as lambdas, which is so if somebody asks what is a functional programming for you, then you know at least there is a concept called lambdas there. Okay. And map and reduce is one other concept in the context of big data. Definitely you would have heard about map reduce and all those things, but it had been existing in Python for a very long time. It's not a new concept. That's again a functional programming concept. Okay, so since we are short of time, we will just get into the next one. So this class we will cover uh, recursions and the file input output and um, the string manipulations and regex. Okay, a bit of that. So what is recursion? What do you remember from your college days? Do you remember anything about recursion? Huh? Repetitive execution. Yeah, I have loops. So why do I need recursions? If you need to repeat something, I can use a loop. Yeah. So it is effectively it's looping. I can call the function in a loop. So where I will effectively get the same. Yeah, it is function call in itself. Yeah, that's the definition of it. Okay, let's stick to that. Let's not get into why do you need recursion. So recursion, yeah. So the question of why do you need recursion is basically it's more effective. The number of lines of the code is less, and definitely there is some memory optimization in terms of when it comes to recursion. Okay, those are the, and it's a very effective way to understand the code. When somebody writes a recursive logic, it actually immediately strikes you. It's like the mathematical induction. If have you learned proofs of, let's say you're in your number theory, have you learned proofs in mathematics? You might have heard about mathematical induction. It's similar to that. Okay, yeah. Um, So it is, let's see, the first one is, um, okay, this is actually an introduction to that. Okay, this is actually a question. There's a problem to write an iterative function called iter power that calculates the exponential by simply using successive multiplication. So this is a way you are introduced to the recursion. So you are doing the same, you are doing something called as iter power in a successive, in a loop, right? And the same thing we will convert it to recursion in the next one. I would suggest try this. Can you try this? Because with what you know already, you can do this. So the function should accept two parameters. One is the base. So if you pass 2 comma 4, your result should be 2 to the power of 4. That's it. So essentially, if you are using an iterative method, you are doing 2 into 2 into 2 into 2 into 2. 5 times you are multiplying 2. So 5 times multiplying 2 is the same as 2 to the power of 5. So obviously, you can use. We have seen that to do this, you don't have to have an iterative logic like this. You don't even need a recursion. We have a function to called powering, right? We can actually use 2 star star 5. But for the time being, just keep it aside. Assume that you don't have such a thing. You create a function which will iteratively multiply 2 5 times. You need a loop here. I would like all of you to attempt this. Yeah, Chidambaram, you want to? So what should I write? I mean, for those of you who haven't, um, have anybody completed it? Okay, we can just walk through this now, since we don't. Um, so what I have just created definition. What should I write? What should be my first line? Okay. Initialize a variable. Yeah, so we haven't started a loop. I mean, initialization, why do you need an initialization? You don't really need. Okay, so yeah, okay, the product you mean. So that has to be initialized outside, right? Okay, so the product, okay, not outside. It has to be it has to be done here. So the product, or rather the power, is equal to, what should I initialize it as? No, that is the output, right? So I will say it is output. Output is equal to 1, 0, 1. What happens if I do 0? The answer will be 0. So it doesn't make any sense. So I will initialize it to 0, 1. Now I will start a loop. Yeah, I mean, a better thing to do here will be, do you want to use a for loop or do you want to use a while loop? We can use a for loop also, but both can be used here. Now, if we use a for, how should it look like? Who said for? Yeah, how should it look like if I use a for? For 1 to b. No, it's not VB. This is not VB. So, ah, for in 1 comma b. So for the for loop accepts only list, right? You can use for only with list. So how do we say we create a list? Range. Yes. So we have to use a range of. Yeah, you are right. So I will do a range of b. I don't have to say 1 because it will start from. In fact, yeah, you are correct. I have to use 1 because if it starts from 0, the answer becomes 0. So you have to start from 1 and go up to, not b plus 1, because we have to include b also. Okay, so the range actually excludes the last number. Okay, so we have to go up to b plus 1. Now you do what? Now you keep multiplying. Output, not plus, output equal to output into, right? Into equal to into. What should I do? Should it be I? Should it be A? Should it be B? What should I do? Huh? It should be. It should be. No. So what are you trying to multiply? You are trying to A into I. So this is a for loop. Using for loop can become a little confusing. So that's why for while loop would be easier. The reason why uh, we have used I in here is actually pointless. We don't need the I value anywhere. I value is only used for looping it. There is no other purpose. So we should actually multiply A here. How many times? The B number of times. That B number of times is used by, given by the loop. So the I is actually not required. We are just discarding it. So in fact, we can, for discarded values, you can even use this underscore. But we can just print I. Sorry. Yeah. So if you want to just see the number of iterations, I can print iteration %d This will give the number of iterations it is doing. Okay, but what is more important is this line, right? We are multiplying the keep multiplying the output with a that many number of iterations. Now, what should I do here? I should we said we don't want to do input output here. So you are inside a function, so we'll rather return the value. What should I return? Output. And how should we call it? Iter power. So let's say 2 comma 4. 2 comma 4. That's it. Hmm? Iter power is not defined. Okay. Hmm. So I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the fifth one is not to be seen. So where is fifth one gone? Since I'm starting from 1, I will basically have to do up to 2. Because from 0 to, I mean, we are avoiding 0, so we are starting only from 1. So if let's say if, b is equal to 5, then it will 1, 2, 3, and 4 it will give. But actually we want 5. So we'll say instead of b plus 1, we will say b plus 2. Okay. Now the important thing to observe here is just printing the iterations. It's not printing the output yet. We should print it because the function only returns the value. So you will have to print it in the main program. So this is the main program. Okay. So yeah, that is in the shell. It will work because shell means when you are calling some when you are returning something, it will by default it will print, right? But here we will have to explicitly print it. So we get 2 2 to the power of 5 is what? Which one? Okay, so it's actually 4. Yeah, it's actually b plus 1 only. Yeah, correct. Yes, correct. Yeah, it was not b plus 2. I tend to do this, and these mistakes keep happening. So b plus 1, b plus 2. I mean, this boundaries are actually sometimes confusing. Okay, but that's why you have a way to test your product. You always have to test your code. So it gives 16. So now the next problem is, so the idea is you should be able to in a position to write this yourself. So this one will actually look similar. Here we have used a while loop. Okay, so it's actually, so the next problem I think it's to use the recursion. So how do we use recursion effectively here? Now for recursion, every program, every problem that you use a loop in, whether it's a while or a for, you can use a recursion. Every program. Okay. So the one you have, there is a good video actually about recursion which I wanted to run, but unfortunately the sound won't go through the live thing. So that's why I chose not to run it. There's a good video which will explain how recursion works. I will try to explain it, but I won't do as much justice to it. Yeah, probably I will share you the link. I think that's a better idea. So I'll just show the. So there are two things which are most important when it comes to a recursive logic. One is called the base condition. So since in a for loop or in a while loop, you say you give a condition somewhere. You give a condition so that it breaks out of that. I mean, it comes out of, not breaks. It comes out. It stops executing the iterations. How do you have to find an alternative to that if you are not using a loop? So that alternative is called a base condition. Okay, so that base condition is normally written. So I will show this program. See if we can understand this. This one is meant to do the same, give the same output as before. It's only the function, there's no main call here. So I've given the answer here. So the base condition is what you are seeing in the first two lines. Okay. So what it essentially does is I'm calling this function within itself, but every time I'm calling, I'm decrementing the second parameter, right? So the exponential exp, I'm calling it the next time with exp minus 1, right? Now the exp minus 1 gets called here. Now that again calls another, makes another call to the recur, but this time it is exp minus 2. How long it should do this? That is the looping mechanism. In case of a while loop, I can say that break out, do it up to this. Now here, this is the part where I say if the exp becomes 0, then return 1, right? So if you graph it out, there's a good way to that video actually shows the graph. It's called actually frames. So there are multiple frames when a recursive logic like this works. Every call to the function actually creates its own frame. Okay, that's it was an easy way to understand. I can share you the link now. I'm thinking how else can I explain with this. I think you have talked about the Python tutor, Krishna, right? Last time we can try to use a Python tutor to say this. Yeah. uh, yeah, no, unfortunately that won't go live because the sound won't be heard by them. It's playing in my local machine, right? So they won't be able to hear the sound. So I'll rather send the link to them, to everyone. But for the time being, I can just show how it works here. Um, okay, so my code is, where is my code? Okay, I don't need this. Okay, so I have created my code within this. So this is the code editor. Now when I run this, there is something called as visualize execution. Okay, so I will see if I can show this. Yeah. So my this red indicator, red arrow actually shows where you are at. So it's in the first line of execution. Right now, how do I? Yeah, the forward. Okay, it creates the frame. I was telling you about the frame. So there is a global frame now, which contains the recur power function. Okay. Now, how do I go to the next one? How do I go to the next? Oh, the program is already terminated. Okay. Okay. So how do I put the break here? Which one? This one? I don't think so. I think it is. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, forward. No, this is not the one. It's highly experimental. This is most annoying. How do I remove this? No, it's not that. It's definitely not. Step one of one is the only thing that I'm seeing here. Okay, maybe I have to make a call to this. Yes, I think obviously I have to make a call. 2 comma 4. Okay, now, oh yeah, now this is fine. Yeah. So the first one, it comes to here, the main program. Okay. Now this call actually immediately goes to this. Now your base and exponential exp has a value of 2 and 4. Okay. So we will go to the next line. So this actually replicates, if you have used the debugger in your code platform and IDE, then you will understand this immediately. But what is happening is you are stepping through each line one at a time. Okay. So this is the first iteration. We are still in the first iteration. So where the value of base and exp is this. Now it checks whether exp is 0. It is not. So it will come to this. But this time what happens? It becomes 2 and 3. Right? Now it goes to this again. Exp is not 0. So it comes here. The next call will be 2 and 2. Next will be 2 and 1. Next will be 2 and 0. Now it will go, it's about to enter this. Now the return one, where does it return? It returns to the caller. It returns to the last call that was made. Okay, so it actually reverses the whole flow. What I mean is, it has made a call, one inside the other, one inside the other, like this, right? Now it goes back in the same way. Now when the last one returns, it goes to the next immediate, the caller, then which returns to the immediate caller. So it finally traces back to the top. You will see that here. I think it will show you clearly. Yeah, so now it returns 1. So you have a return value of 1. Okay, so you can see that stacks are reducing one by one. Okay, so that return value of 1 actually returned to this call. Now the return value became 2. Now which returns to the previous one, it becomes 4. Which returns, it goes to 2, 8. Then it finally becomes 18. So you get, sorry, 16. So your answer is, so actually the frames is very important to understand. So every call to the function actually creates a frame. The frames are nested. You can think of it as being nested, one inside the other. And when the last frame returns, it returns to the last but one, then it returns to the last but two, so until it traces back completely. That's how the recursion works. So fundamentally, recursion is very easy to understand, but you can definitely get confused. There are chances of getting confused, especially when you are defining your base condition. So what base condition should I define? That is that is where typically people get confused. Okay, but with tools like this, the Python tutor, I think you can easily visualize these things. It becomes very simple. Okay, let's see if we can do a problem. I'm assuming that you're able to understand this, right? Let's try to actually implement that in a problem. Okay, let's leave. Okay, let's. What time is it? 11:30. Okay. I will see if there is a simple problem that you can try, but all of them are. We don't want to spend too much time. Yeah, factorial problem, right? Yeah, that is it's a very frequently encountered recursive problem. Yeah, I think let's stick to that factorial thing. So you all know what is factorial, right? So factorial of 5 is 1 into 2 into 3 into 4 into 5. So let's to do that using a simple um, Simple iterative logic is the same as what we did before. Now convert that problem into using recursion. It will look the same. It will look the same as what we had written. So what we have is this. How will we change this program to give an iteration of a given number? So right now, recur power takes two arguments, but for a factorial program, it needs only one argument. Let's say the number, only the number is needed. So it always goes to from 5 to 1. So you don't need a second argument. So how will just modify this program? You have some basic template that you can use. So try to complete this, and then we can go for a short break maybe. So I'll just copy it from here. You can debug it, but not the visualization. You cannot get a visualization as in this tag goes like this. You cannot get that. In that way, this is brilliant. Okay, so some of you have already completed this. So I'm just going to use the same template we created for recur power. So what should we name it as? We will call it as a factorial, right? But in this case, yeah, exp0 is going to return 1. But instead of calling recur power, we are going to call the factorial function itself. Now, yeah, the first thing to note is you don't have a base and an x. Okay, we just have something called as a number. We can use a base variable itself, but I'm just calling it as a number. So the next time I call it with a number minus 1. Then I keep reducing it until it becomes 0 when it returns 1 to the previous column. This is what you did, right? I'm assuming this is what you did. Otherwise, you won't get the answer anyway. Yeah, you can stop it at 1 itself. Yeah, you can. Both are, it doesn't matter because multiplying by 1 is going to return the same thing. It doesn't matter. So if we run this, you should get exp is not defined. Okay, number. What is this? Oh, yeah. So what should you multiply it with? You should not multiply it with anything. You should just keep calling the same factorial function again and again. What happened now? We reduced it to 0. This is not minus. Okay, I think my vision is getting lesser and lesser. It's no, instead of typing minus, I typed equal to. Um, okay. Oh yeah, correct. Yeah, number into. Yes. So are we? Is it correct? 5 into 4 into. Are we correct? Right. Okay. Okay. So should we take a little break for 5-10 minutes? So we'll come back and see the. We'll come back and see the file input output. We will not spend any more on recursion because we can keep doing the recursion stuff, but since it's not that critical for from a realistic problem perspective, at least from a testing angle, if you look at it, there won't be much real problems. Okay. Okay. So that mails was not live, I guess. That mail was not live, right? The Gmail was not live. Okay. 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 So when we come back, we will spend time on the file input output and the other thing, string manipulation. We will see how regex works, the basic stuff. Um, and then finally, we will start the API testing a little bit.
No, it is already muted.
We're live. Okay, are you able to watch in YouTube? Watching it, just make sure it's yeah, that works. Sure. No, because that cannot work because when I call that function again, sorry, I'm live. When I call that function again, the start that gets initialized again to one. So I'm yeah, I'm surprised how we can work. No, no, cannot be. If the logic is wrong, then Python cannot do it. I think there is some. Yeah. Okay. So we are back now. Okay. So right now, is it live? Okay. Good. Um, so we are doing the recursion only up to this extent. Okay. And so we will look at the file input output a bit. So the file input is input and output. That's something which is extremely important for testers. So you can imagine doing stuff like reading from an external file, let's say a log file, right? And I want to see how many times there have been errors happening. Or let's say if you want to read, if you want to do an automation, test automation, which typically uses a data-driven approach, where you read an external CSV file or an Excel file. So how do you manage all these things require file input output, right? So and for those of you, have you used file input output in Java or any other environment? Have you? You have? Anybody who hasn't had an idea of how to use? No, not how to use, but an idea about what file reading means. So a couple of things are important when it is similar to reading it in any other environment. When you open a file, there are multiple modes of opening a file. You open a file to read the items from there, the lines from there, or you can open to write in a file, or you can open to append to a file, to an existing file. Okay, so there are three modes, and there is of course a binary mode. You can open a file in. Those are additional modes. When you open a file for reading, you can open it in a text read mode. You can open it in a binary read mode. There are multiple ways of, but basically there are three modes. The read, which is called R, W, and A. So there are three modes. So these three modes has to be passed when you are opening a file as parameter. Open is a function, is rather a method. You have to pass this as a parameter. Now, when you open a function, it will return you what is called as a file handle. Okay, it's you can think of it like as a pointer again. Just like what we saw that when you pass functions around, it's a pointer, right? So it returns a file pointer which you have to store, and then you can use that file pointer in a loop. Okay, and it's there. Actually, you will see the differences happening between other languages. In Python, it's easily doable using a while loop. You can, while that function, that file pointer, you can keep looping through. So every time in the loop, you will get a new line. So let's see how this works. So we have to have a file. We'll start with how to read a file. Um, okay, let's see any file that I have. Okay, I will create a new file. Test file. So we'll have A, B, C, D, 4 lines. Okay. Now let's try to open this file from within Python. Okay. Um, okay. So the function is called open. Okay. The open is a function. I mean, it's a method rather available in an object class. Now, when you call open, you have to pass 2 parameters to it. The first parameter is the file that you want to open. So we want to open in D colon, we want to open something test.text. Second one is the mode you want to open. You pass R. Even if you don't pass R, by default, this is the optional parameter. So open method has an optional parameter. Even if you don't pass R, it will assume the default is R. It will always open it in read mode. Now this one we need to assign it to a variable. That variable is the file pointer. Normally it's called FP, just to indicate it's a file pointer. What happened here? Okay. So one thing that you have to be careful about is if you use a single slash, right? So there is, so the single slash basically stands for a escape. Sorry, not an escaping. It's a special meaning. Okay, let me just say that. So there are special characters like slash t, slash a, slash b, right? So slashes. If you have heard about, I don't know if it's there in Java. You have used in Java. I don't know. Every language will have, but if you have used it, slash n definitely have used, right? So if I just use slash n, or in this case slash t, it stands for a tab. So Python will not know whether what you meant is a tab or something else. So you have to say that no, it's a literal slash. In that case, you have to escape meaning. It's called an escape character. So you have to have a slash slash, 2 slashes. So if you have to convey a special meaning, this is not Python, any language. If you have to convey that the slash that you are writing is a real slash, literal slash, then you have to uh, prefix that with another slash. Slash is called an escape character. It just tells that what is going to be the next character has is remove that special meaning. It's a literal. So you use a slash slash. Okay, now FP will give the actual string representation of it. Now I can just read this file. So I can either use fp.read, where it actually gives me the content. Now if I call the fp.read again, it will say blank, because fp is, once it is read, it just flushes out everything, right? So that's the way it behaves. So I will open it again. I can use this like this, while fp. Okay. Now I can say, what should I do? So while, sorry, I will not use while. For line in FP. Okay, this is another way of reading it. So previously we saw that fp.read reads the whole thing in one shot. Now if I do this for line in FP, now if I say print line, it will print every line there. So it's as simple as this. So there are only 2 lines here, and 3 lines here. So you open the file, assign it to a file pointer, and you just loop through that. Every time you will get a line. Okay. So and writing. So how can you write it into this? Sorry. So let's say I want to write something into the same file. So now if I do this, it's going to overwrite the existing file. So if I do an FP now I say for not for line in FP, that can be used for reading it. Now, yeah, yeah. So I should actually say for. I can use a for if I have multiple things to write. I can just say fp dot write. Right now, I have to remember to close this file. Okay, unless I close the file, the saving won't be done. Okay, so it is still under the lock. So once this is closed, I can go and have a look at this. It would have written that. That's all. Right now you know how to do so many things. For example, if I want to write a list of names in this, how can I use this? Hmm? Okay, we will come back to this. We'll actually write a program. Okay, I will delete this also. Okay, now let's say I have a list of names. This is just these are no, this is the basic thing about file write. There's nothing more to learn about file read and write. Now everything else is an application of this. How you apply this? Okay, so let's say I have a list of names. Krishna, right? Your name is Krishna Chidambara, right? So let's say I have 3 names. I want to write each of them. Okay, so what should I do? I should say fp is equal to open test.text, right? Now, how do I write a list into this? Of course, when I write a list into this, I don't want to write the whole thing. I don't want it to look like a list. I want to write each name in a separate line. So for that, I need to use a loop. I will say for name. I'll call this as names just to make it more clear. For name and names. So what did I achieve when I used a for name and names? I'm getting each name one at a time, right? From that list. Now I say fp dot write name. When I come out of this, I say fp dot close. Right? So what should be what do you expect as the output? It should have separate lines for each names. Right? Okay, let's anyway just try to execute this once. Okay, let's go and check. Okay, it actually write it together. Why is that? It actually wrote it together because we asked to write it. We didn't add a new line there, so we have to have a new line. So how do we add a new line? You can just add a new line like this. Okay, so after every line, it will give a /n. Now this should have 3 lines. So writing, reading, we have seen it's as simple as this. Now if you want to append it, you just use an A mode. So I can use a mode called A here. Instead of W, I will use A. Now this, I'll just keep writing the same number again. Okay, now, okay, I didn't execute this. Okay, what happened now? Yeah, I have appended it. Right? Now how do I write? Now it's all a matter of um, application of what we learned. How do we write a CSV in this? So CSV has, of course, Python has a CSV module in which you can write CSV. But let's say if you want to write a CSV by hand, by yourself, through a program, how would you do it? CSV essentially is a comma separated file. Okay, so let's say I want to create a file with 3 columns. Okay, the name, age, and let's say company. Okay, and have let's say 3 rows in it. I can use the same method. Only thing is I have to take care of putting that comma after every line. Okay, so I'll just show you a sample of how you can write a CSV. I'll just show the program, and then you can, I think, you can try the example here. Okay, so let's say this is what I want. What I want is the names. Let's say ages. Okay. Let's write it as numbers itself. Okay, 30. Companies. So let's, for the time being, let's put a, okay, we will put some real number. Infosys. Okay, I'm not working in Infosys, but I'm just telling. Okay, so Wipro, Cognizant. Okay, so let's say these are the names. Now, how do I want the output to appear? I want 3 columns. The first column should be called names, then ages, then companies, then the rows should accordingly look, right? So it should have Anand 10 Infosys, Krishna 20 Wipro, so like that. So that's pretty simple to do. So we can do either this, or if we know the number of items that we have to write, or if the number of columns if we have to write, let's say we know that it is 3. Okay, so this is not the only way. So don't assume that this is the only way to write. I mean, to interpret how the application, not interpret. What am I saying? This is not the only way to create this product. You can loop it in any dimension that you want, but I'm just looping it in the dimension of the number of columns. Okay, so I'm going to write it as I in a range of 3 because I know that there are 3 columns. Okay, so I'm going to write names of I. What is names of I? The names of I should give what string should it, Anand should give Anand, right? So the next time, the next iteration should give names of 1, which is Krishna, and then like that. Okay, so instead of slash n, I should give a comma. Okay, so I should keep repeating this. How many other number of? Yeah, so ages. No, I'm writing the columns actually here. So these are the columns, right? So ages I. Okay, and once, okay, I can't really do that because I should have a slash n at the end. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so at this time I will just show one. Okay, so I want you to complete this. I'll just show one column being written. So let's say I am writing here Anand, Krishna, and Chidambara. And by the way, actually I'm doing something wrong. I should note this is not my intent, right? So I want to write the columns with comma separated. So I want to write names of I. Okay, just see if you can understand what I'm writing. I'm just write something. So names I, instead of plus, okay, I'm going to use uh, percent s, sorry, percent s, percent s. Which is I. So at the end of it, I should put a slash. Is an easier way to write it, but see if you can understand it. So what am I doing? Actually, this loop is no more for the columns. It is actually for the rows now. I've changed the dimension. Okay, I've just because using that for columns actually is not working out because I have to decide, I have to use three for loops then in that case. So I decided to use it, that for loop, for the row dimension. Okay, so I'm writing 3 rows. In each row, I'm writing the name, the age, and the company. Make sense? Are you able to? So just try this out in your system. So if you are not able, if you don't want to spend time on typing all the names, you can just fill A, B, C, D, and all that. Doesn't matter. Okay, is it too small font? Let me see how I can increase that. Yeah. Yes, it should be visible now. It will. Yeah, it will create a file called test.txt. It's already there. Okay, so don't append it. Just write it. Yeah, use the write mode. So it will overwrite the existing file, or it will, if it's not existing, it will create a new one. But you should have the D colon in your machine to run this. Yeah. Yeah. All of them come in one line. All the rows. Slash. Yeah. Is it working? Okay. So at least one of you got it working. Krishna working? Is it working? Good. Okay. Now this is actually writing only the data. Let's say this is not complete, right? So we have to make, if you want to make meaning out of this, then it has to have the proper headers also. It has to have the column names. So can you fill that up? Can you also write the header names? Out of the loop, yes. Hmm? It working? So, anybody else? Is it working? Yeah, just change that extension to CSV. So you have Excel in your system. Okay. So once you save it, just open. So I'm going to also change this to CSV. If I change this to CSV, just change the extension. It will automatically, your operating system recognizes CSV. It knows how to open it. If you have made the proper file association, it will open in Excel. That's it. So you have created a CSV. So let's see if it works. Yes, so it has created a CSV. It has created, right? So that's as simple as that. If you had to use any other language, you would probably have a little tough time. Okay, now, so since, shall we proceed? So for those of you who haven't done it yet, or not able to do it yet, and do it as a practice at your leisure. Okay. So we just want to move ahead. So let me add one more. So this is something not exactly related to function pointer. Let me add one complication to this, mainly because the way you are getting the data may not be, you may not see the data in the form of three lists. You may find it in a slide in many different ways. For example, if you are getting the input from a big data structure, for example, it's a list of tuples. You have heard of tuples? We talked about tuples, right? So let's say if it is a list of, So instead of calling this names, I will call it as employees or um, employees. Yeah. Okay, it's a list of tuples now. So the first tuple is this, the second one is this, and the sorry, and the third one is this one. So now the reason why I'm doing this now is the way your inputs come in could be different. It could be like, for example, you are transforming a data from one format to another. Very much possible. For example, your data is in XML format today. You want to create a CSV format, right? Your XML format, first you have to read, right? So it is an, and then you have to use your logic to parse. It's called parsing. Parse the XML format. You have to understand each of them and store it in some convenient data structure, right? So if it is an XML, typically you will use an XML module. So there are LXML modules in Python. So you'll typically use that. You will not want to create your own XML logic. So almost all the formats have their own parsers and all the modules existing in Python. Now, if it's an HTML, for instance, if you want to translate that into an Excel, so transformation, data transformation can be easily achieved with this. Now that's the reason I did this. So now let's say your format is like this. How would you um, how would you actually do? So the same code won't work because you have just a single list called employees which contains a lot of tuples. So your fp.write logic has to be suitably changed. How will you change this? This is actually not. It's only about reading the proper data, getting the proper data from each of these. For instance, if you copy this, you can always use it in a shell, right? So I'm going to use this from a shell. Okay. Now, if I want to access the first item in this, so this will give the first tuple. Okay. So employee 0 will give this. If I want to access the name of the first tuple, then I will again put 0. If I want to access the second one, I mean the age of it. So if I want to access, for instance, the last guy's company, right? I can do it in multiple ways. I can put 2, right, comma 2. It will give this. Or I can also put it, if it's the last guy that I want, I can put -1. And let's say I want the company, so I can also do this. So it is, these are all things we have learned. Now you have to use this appropriately in a proper looping mechanism to write this, right? So you're looping through your structure is. So I'm actually doing this as a preparation for our API testing, because reading a JSON is actually very similar. So we will probably go into that one. Um, I think before that I need to also cover the regular expressions. I wanted to actually cover that, but should we push it to the next one? No, as a continuation to this, if we do the API testing, not I don't want to cover the whole API testing today. So instead of having the regex, dealing with the regex today, I think maybe we can push that to the next one, and because it occurs in a continuation. Okay, so I'll just make that slide more, because regex needs some explanation, because many people may not understand what, because regex needs a little bit of understanding of how the expression is, how the patterns are formed. So that needs a little, I need to completely change my line. So since we are in this topic already, I think it makes sense. So, okay, so can we try this problem? How do I create the same Excel from the employees data structure? from the employees data structure, what I have shown here, can we create the same output that you created earlier? So previously I have 3 different lists, right? And I could access it like names I, ages I, companies I. But this won't work anymore because your structure is different. Are you able to relate to what I'm saying? Huh? You don't yeah. So maybe multiple for loops you need. But we have to write that. Basically what I want you to do is write that one. We have to have probably a nested looping. So this is the line that you need to rewrite. Rewrite this line. So this needs to look different. And probably you will also add one more for loop here. You will have to. Yeah, I think we have to. I have not covered. I think maybe next class. So the question is on list comprehension. So I think the next class we will talk about that. So we have 3 more classes. So one of these classes definitely will cover. So once you complete, just raise your hands. Tell me if you have done. So shall I try my solution? Shall I start writing? Shall I start writing the? Okay. So here earlier we actually assumed that there are going to be 3 rows, but right now we don't have to assume because there is a single data structure. So we are going to use 2 loops here, one for the rows and one for the columns. Yeah. So the first one can be on the first one can be on the uh, I think it's best to have the columns, right? So let this be the columns because it's easier to actually write the columns by commas. You can just write. Um, okay, how many columns? How do you find how many columns are here? From that data structure, if you look at that structure, can you find how many columns it has? Yeah, I mean, of course, I don't want the number. Can we derive that number from the data structure itself? Length of the list is what? Length of the list is the number of rows. Yeah, length of the tuple. But how do we get there? Length of the tuple. How do we get the first tuple? We should use a no. We can just use a len of employees of 0. That's the number of columns. Yeah. No. If it is different, then you can't write it. Then you won't be able to write it. So the first check that you can do, I mean, even before getting into the for loop, you can actually check if the length of all the tuples are the same. If it is not the same, then you can just give a warning and come out. I mean, that will be an advanced thing. I mean, we are for now we are assuming that all the tuples are of the same length. Okay, so we will just get the first tuple and measure its length. That's the number of columns. Okay, now for these many number of columns, why is it giving a? Okay, I have to put one more bracket. So for these many number of columns, what is next? I have to. Um, okay, let me think. If is it the right way to? No, probably not. I should probably start with the rows. No, hold on. I should start with the row. Um, Not range. I will start with the rows. I think that is the best option. Okay. So I will start with the rows. For row in, how do you find how many rows are there in this? It's, yeah, that's actually simple. So I should say length of employees, right? So the length of employees. For each row, you can do this. Now you don't actually need this. No, you can't do that. So instead of doing all these, I would suggest um, doing this. I'm making so many changes dynamically. I'm sorry because uh, it's very difficult to uh, actually explain why I'm changing it because since much of what I'm teaching actually is not pre-planned, so right, it's very hard to actually plan out an 8-week session. So uh, that's the reason a lot of things that you're seeing is dynamic. So currently, what I'm doing is instead of doing the length, I'm going through the entire list, and taking each tuple one, the whole tuple itself, right? So right now, for when I say for row in employees, I'm actually getting one tuple at a time. So now the row is actually equal to this. This is one row. Okay. Now inside this, I have another for loop to go through the columns. Okay. So we can name it suitably. So we can call it column. Hmm? In fact, we don't need a len at all now. So instead, how can we do this for row in column in row? I can do that. How? Because my row is actually a tuple. Tuple is similar to list. I can do a for loop over the tuple. If I do a for over tuple, I'm getting each column one by one. Right? So right now I don't have to access the items with an index anymore. I have the actual element itself. So I don't need to do much of this. I can just write it directly. So I can just write it as column. I'm making a dynamic change now. I'm very sorry about that. So basically what I'm doing now is instead of writing the entire column with commas in between, I'm writing one column at a time. Since I'm using a loop for the each column in the tuple, I can actually write the element itself. So it now inside this one, it's going to get the first column. So it writes the first column, comes back, writes the second column, writes the third column, then it comes out. At this time, we need to we can print the new line. Okay. So once we print the new line, then it fetches the next row. Then it again starts the column loop. Right? Yeah, there is something that's missing. Yeah, here. Yes. Right. So this should work. Okay. So I made so many dynamic changes. Let's see if this works. Now, this was written in 1229. Let's see if yeah, this best. Okay. What happened? Okay. So writing any structure into a CSV or any other format. So basically transforming from one data format to another is very simple. Once you represent the data in a data structure, it's really simple because Python allows you to access any element from anywhere. Using a loop is very simple, right? So all these exercises for getting to the JSON format. Okay, so if you say go ahead, I will go ahead. So because JSON, I mean, we are for API testing, we are entering one more avenue of because we need to get into something else. I have to explain a bit about, for the benefit of those who haven't done API testing, I will have to explain a bit about what APIs are, and then come to this. So, yeah, I mean, you are okay, but what about the general? What do you feel? Do you think that this is understandable? Do you think you will be able to? I'm not asking you to, because we are doing it within 3 hours. So initially, when we designed this course, right, over 8 weeks, I was, many people actually asked me, are we overdoing it? Are we spending too much time here? In fact, I also had a feeling in between that we don't probably need 8 weeks for 3 hours. It becomes 24 hours now. So do we need that much time? I was also a little confused. But now it seems to be very less. We haven't even covered 5% of what Python can do. But that 5% is actually good enough. If you understand that 5%, I also know only 5%. So, so don't worry. I also know only that. But with that, you can do so many things. The rest of the 95% are different ways of doing the same 5, essentially, almost. So if you say yes, if you feel confident that you can do it yourself, uh, then I can move ahead. Yes, no, yes. Is it a yes from majority? Majority of the people here. Okay. Uh, okay. So coming to web services. Um, so we are actually entering a real application testing application, right? So you used web services, or have you heard of web services anytime? HTTP, yeah, these are HTTP based. Uh, so have you any of you have really done API testing before? Just for me to. Okay, so you know what web services are. right? You are not new to that concept completely, right? Yes, no, no, but without knowing, so you have done. Okay. Uh, so to explain it simply, web services are nothing but functions um, on the HTTP protocol, okay, which you can call in a HTTP protocol. That's it. So when I say HTTP over the web, you can make calls to them and get the responses. That's it. It's the same as functions. Nothing, no difference. So what does function have? Function has a name. So API also has a name. The only thing is it looks like something slash something slash. It has function has parameters. This also has parameters. Okay, but there are different types of APIs. The get type of API. So there are the first most commonly used APIs are called get. Okay, they gets it's what the name suggests. The get actually gets the information from somewhere. That somewhere is the server, is your web server, or your database server, or your application, whatever. So the get APIs will have a set of parameters, and the way you pass the parameters will look a little different. They don't use commas, and you don't call functions with two brackets. Instead, you will call it with a question mark. So this is an it's not an web service, but still is a format of an API. The address bar, what it shows in the address bar, this is the same format and a web service will take. A get web service will take. So there is a name. The name, what is the name? The name is, there is no name here. Actually, it is called slash. This part here is called the domain. Okay, that is not the name of the API. The name typically follows this. So for instance, if I do, let's say a search, this part here is the name of the API, the search. Okay. Now this part is called the domain. Okay. Now from here onwards, everything is parameters for the function. So everything that follows the question mark is a parameter. Okay. Now there are so many parameters that are being passed here. How do you know how many parameters are passed? So everything, all the parameters are separated by this ampersand symbol. Instead of comma, it uses ampersand. So this is the first parameter. This is the value of the first parameter. There is no value actually. Site equal to blank. There is no value. This is the second. This is the value for that. This is the third. This is the value. This is the fourth. So like that, it goes on. So these are actually. So how do you know the value? They are actually key and value. Okay. So the parameter and parameter value. So they are separated by that comma, that equal to. So if you have to split it, if you have used Postman, you can see this very clearly. If you, I don't know if I have Postman here. Have you, anybody used Postman tool? Okay, this is something which typically testers use for what you call manually testing the APIs. Okay, so you can test all the forms of GET, and there are so many different ways of categories of APIs. So this is how it looks like. So if you paste this, you can see that if you click on these parameters, you will see all those parameters extracted from that URL. Okay, so this is, the first one is called site. There is no value. Source is HP. Q is Moolya. So there are how many parameters? There are 5. Right. Now click on send. You can actually send it to the server. Then this part here shows the response. So it gets the response. The response is not a JSON in this case. That's why I'm not calling it as a web service. It is an HTML. Okay. So, but the way web services work exactly is the same. It sends some request, and the way requests, I've just split the request into multiple pieces, and so that's the same way web services look like. When you click on send, it gets the response, but not in HTML format. It will be in the form of a JSON. So let's take one example of an API here. Okay, let's take this API. So this API is this stack. You have all used Stack Overflow, right? So Stack Overflow has certain set of APIs. In fact, most of the products that you will see in the web will have APIs of its own. So Google has the entire Google runs on APIs. Okay, so they have APIs for every single product of theirs. We will come to that. Now, this is the Stack Overflow API, which will do essentially, this is for and doing an advanced search, right? So how does it? This is the URL. This is the API name, search/advanced. This is the domain name. Sorry, this whole thing is the API name. This is the domain name, correct? And there are so many parameters. After question mark, this is the first one. This is the value of that. This is the, so when you can see that there are so many. Now, when you send it, what happens? It gets you a response. But this response is not an HTML file. Okay, this is a JSON. This is a proper REST API. So REST always uses JSON. Okay, and the SOAP API uses XML. SOAP APIs you won't hear much nowadays. You'll only see REST. Now the advantage of this, you can actually see if you have learned Python up to this, the data structures, right? You can recognize that this structure here. How do I drag this up? I don't know. This is okay. So if you can recognize this structure as a dictionary. So what did we say dictionary was? Dictionary will have, how does a dictionary look? It looks like this. So anything defined between two flower braces is a dictionary, and anything defined between two square brackets is a list, right? Between two normal brackets is a tuple, right? So those we know. But in this one, we need to know only about dictionary and list. If you know about that, then you know how to parse your JSON response. This is JSON is the response that you are seeing here, even though it is not exactly a Python dictionary, it's very similar to that. You can see that it starts with flower brace. You can see that it contains, the first key is called items. Okay, the value of that corresponding key is after the colon, the key and the value. That's how we write a dictionary in Python, right? And so that value is actually a list because it starts with a bracket. And what does that list contain? The first item of that contains a dictionary, correct? So this is a dictionary. Inside that you have tags, value of which is again a list. So it's nested to so much extent, but it's parsable so easily with Python because it is. This is very similar structurally. It's very similar to what a Python dictionary looks like, or a Python data structure looks like. So the only thing that you need now is a way to execute this API from Python. So we have used Postman to send it. You got a response, right? Now talking about automating an API, you just need a way from Python how to execute this API. Okay, that is provided by a third-party module called request. Yeah. So fortunately, we don't have to deal with the HTTP protocol and all those stuff, right? So you can use. Okay, I will initially show it here. Any third party module you need to first install. How do you install? You use PIP to install. And for PIP, you need to come out of this shell. You need to go to the Python 27 scripts. Okay, so you have something called as PIP here. There is a program somewhere here. So you need to PIP, say install, and say request. That's it, and hit enter. Now that will take care of the rest. It will take care of getting the proper module from the internet. It will install it into your. Uh, so if it's already installed, it will say it's taking a long time. Yeah, so it says requirement already satisfied. So I have already installed it. Now what does it do? It goes and installs, creates a folder in my site packages. I think in the first class we have seen. It creates a local folder. So all the files with respect to that module is there in your machine now. Okay, now how do I use this? For that, go inside the shell and import that module. Okay, so I will say import the request module. Now once I import, so I've talked about the dir function before. It's nothing to do with the execution part, but we can use this to see what all things are available in this module. Basically in this, yeah, in this namespace. Okay, so there is a function called get. There is a function called post. There is, okay. So we have only talked about get type of APIs, right? So there are other types. For easy explanation, I can. Okay, we are too late. Okay, I think I have to. I will just show an example. So yeah, apart from the get type of API, you also have post. You have put. You have delete. You have so many other options. So just for a simple understanding, just think of it as database operations. So in a database, what all things you can do? You can create a row, you can add a row, you can delete a row, you can update a row, right? So those are the typical operations you do. So similar to that, you have on a on a database also. So on a web service level, you have ways to fetch, get the existing value, the querying the values. You have a way to add, which is called post. So post are the type of APIs normally used for sign-in operations. When you are signing into some portal, you have to send some details from here, from my client to the server, saying that this is my username password. And now the server will have its own mechanism to uh, to verify that, and it will get back to me saying you are a valid user. Now you can use. It will give me a session ID. I can start using it. If it's an update, similar. So in some cases, update type of APIs may be used to update the value in the either the database server or. But typically, you will see only get and post. These are the normal API types that you will see. Um, okay, so calling a get API uses the get method here. A post method uses a post method. How do I use it? You call it very simple. Say requests dot get and pass the API name. So not the API name, the URL, the complete URL. Okay, along with the parameters and all. So you say http dot. This is actually not an API. This will return an HTML page. Request module doesn't know whether you are using an API or it will just send a request. That's it. It will send a request, get a response. So if I send this, it has gone to the server. It has gotten me a response, and it has printed the response object. It gets me a response object. It doesn't get the text of it. For getting the text, you have to read the object for that. So how do I read the object? First, I have to store this somewhere, that object. Now I say response dot text. This is your HTML page. executing your API is not different from this, same. Okay, so let's see how to execute this API. This is an API. So I have imported request already. I'll say request dot get. I'll pass this. I'll get it into a response. Okay, it has gotten the response. Now if I print response dot text, it gets the output. That's it. Only two lines. Now this is actually returning like, even though it looks like a dictionary, it's for Python it is not a, it doesn't still know that it is a dictionary. It's a string for it. The whole thing is coming as a string. So I have to tell that it is a string. I mean, it's a JSON response. So for that, I have to use another module which I have installed called JSON. Okay, and JSON has a function called loads, which takes a string and returns the JSON object. Okay, so I will pass the string to this string I got into JSON.loads. Okay, now I will pass the I will assign this to a JSON response variable. Okay, now what you have got, JSON response is actually a is actually a JSON. Now I can use my Python dictionary to parse this very easily. Okay, now let's actually see it here. Okay, do you need this program? Right, we don't need it. Okay. So I will do the same thing. Import request, import JSON. Okay, so what I will do is, what is our, okay, so let's say the service API. Let's call it as a variable. Okay, so this is the our API that we want to execute. Okay, now what I will do is I will just say request dot get. I'll pass this API, right? So instead of pasting the string directly here, I just assigned and used it here. Now this gives a response variable. So I assign it to a response, I mean a response object, which I assign it to a some variable. Now I have to say that this is a JSON. Now I will say, I will save this into a JSON response. This is the same thing we did from the shell. Okay. Now if I print JSON response, let's see what happens. Yeah, so you go to your JSON response. Okay. Now we can easily parse this one. That is the advantage of this. So if you look at your structure from the Postman, you know that this is a dictionary which contains an items. So let's say I want to, so the items list actually contains all the items from the search, right? So let's say all the, it will, this advanced search will get me all the projects from the Stack Overflow. So each project will be an item within my items list. Now I want to see how many items, how many projects has it got. How do I do that? It's easy because it's a list, so I can use a len function on that, right? Now let's see if I can do that. So the number of, how do I get the number of projects? First I have to get to the items key. How do I get to the items key? Just like a dictionary, you can use a string to access it, correct? So we are already here. So we are already here in this list. Now we can get the len of this. if you print it, and we can of course beautify number of projects are percent. If you do this, 30 projects, right? Now I want to know what are the projects. Let's say I want the name of the first project. So the name is contained in where? The name is contained in, I think, let's say we want the link. For each project I want, let's say I want the link. Okay. So how do we do that? Since it's a dictionary, so we have to get to here, get to the items. Now since items is a list, I can loop over this for item in items, right? The AC on off. Ah, yes, yes, yes. AC is off. Huh? It's very. Anyway, we are finishing in some time. Um, so we have now inside the loop we have every project, all the details about that project. Now, what are the details we are fetching? So each of this section. How come I'm not? Okay. This up to this is one project, right? So because we have a comma after that, that is one project. Now we have already fetched up to this. Now how do we get the first item in that? And we have since we are in a loop, we don't have to get the first item. We will go into each item one by one. So the first iteration has already got this. Now we have to go to which key? We have to go to owner, the key called owner. So I will say item owner. Once we are in the owner, we have to go to link, right? So we'll again give a link. So print. That's all. So if we do this, right? So you got all the links. Right? Each of the projects it has gone into and it has got the. So the parsing of your JSON structure becomes extremely simple. And now you can do whatever you want with this data. You can write into a CSV file. I mean, you might want to, for example, if it should be in a readable format, then it should be. Right? So this is the basic. Now I think with this, I think we will continue the next class with the same, and then we'll go to the regex and all those things. We'll come back to the file, the string manipulation and all those. So any questions so far? Hmm? Just hold on, just okay. Okay. Yeah, any question you had? See the code. People don't know. People don't know it yet. It's very simple to use that. Actually, not many people use automation on APIs. I don't know why. That's the first problem. People tend to stick to their postman and try to manually read stuff, which is a pain. Because that has been there for a long time. People just stick to that. That's because of uh, it's very difficult to change certain the way certain things are done, right? But I have shown you how easy is it to use Python. We have a very extensive solution on API as well. We have built a proper framework, like you can define categories, subcategories. You can define I want to run only get, I can run only post. You can pass around. You can get the some value from the response and pass it to the next request. There are so many options that we have built. So it's very simple to use in Python. Yeah, yeah. So we have a framework actually, which currently is maybe I can show pieces of that offline. So essentially, it is only this. You can now build anything on top of it. Is over. Right? Yeah. So I think for the part 5, I think we are done. Uh, so if there are any questions, I think we can discuss it in Flock, or maybe if you have still more questions, I think we can discuss in the next part 6 of it. So I will start. As I said before, we will continue with the API testing for the next class, and then we will go back to what we covered today, and we will finish it off with the string manipulation, and because that is a very critical piece that all the testers should know. Okay, I think we are done. Thanks guys for joining.